Hey everyone, welcome to Starmorph, where we talk about artificial intelligence and web development. Today, I'm really excited to introduce you to Ismail, the founder of Superagent, which is a tool to build, deploy, and manage LLM-powered agents. So, Ismail, thank you very much for coming on today. Excited to talk to you.
Thanks for having me. Excited to share thoughts and talk to you as well.
Awesome. Yeah. So, to get started, could you tell us a little bit about your background as a developer and kind of how you got to the point where you are now building Superagent?
Yeah, I can give you some background. Basically, I'll give you the long story if that's all right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm born in Iran, raised in Sweden on the West Coast, studied organic chemistry at the university, local university here. Have been programming since I got my first Amiga 500 from my dad, and have never worked as a chemist, but have always been interested in entrepreneurship. Started a math club actually when I was on my second year of university, which actually blew up and became quite a huge thing. We were basically, I organized around 200 university students to act as mentors for around 1,000 junior high school students.
Wow.
And then I got the chance to travel all around the world and meet junior high school kids and talk about math, science, and technology and why you should be doing that kind of stuff. Even though I myself actually dropped out of university after 2 years because I wanted to do other things and didn't feel like I was learning the stuff I wanted to learn. Had met a friend, a good friend and partner, Alan, and we started our first company together around 12 years ago in the ad tech space. And that went pretty well. And we successfully exited that company and been building different kind of products, services, primarily in software as a service the past 10 years. Some which have been successful, some which haven't been successful, like life. And around 2 years ago, I started uh, I started basically hearing about AI for the first time. I've heard about it before, and I've had friends who had worked with AI before, but I never understood what they did. It was always so complex. It wasn't something tangible for a regular human being. It felt like let's say this was 8 years ago or something. And AI was deployed a lot in the marketing or ad tech space at that time in order to optimize ad revenue and cost per clicks and stuff like that. So there was a lot of buzz surrounding AI, and then it died off. And around, I would say, for me at least, around 2 years ago, we started coming back with image diffusion and stable diffusion and dolly. And my partner actually, he was like, have you seen this? I can make a dog. He loves dogs, so he was like, I can just write a prompt and it just gives me a dog, and it actually looks like okay, it doesn't look like shit. And I looked at it, and he started sending he joined the Midjourney Discord group basically and started like spamming me with dog pictures all the time. And I was like, why are you doing this? I hate this. They were all ugly, the faces were a bit messed up and the paws were like, looked like Frankenstein dogs basically. But he said like this is like a huge thing, you should check it out. And I joined the Midjourney Discord server basically and started playing around and got interested into the technology of it all and started doing some minor training of own like diffusion models and stuff like that, trying to find some kind, because I'm a very, application oriented guy. I don't do stuff just because it's fun. I try to find some kind of real life application. And since I'm from the ad or, marketing tech background, creating images from nothing is like the holy grail of, everything that has to do with social media posts and stuff like that. So I started working with it. I tried to create some fine-tuned models and stuff like that, and deploy them to production. And I instantaneously felt the pain of taking a AI app into production, basically. And in that time, I also started getting into a lot of large language models, and like the agentic. I heard about the term agent for the first time, and started looking around to find different, frameworks and open source tools that were available at that time, and started contributing to some, and eventually found LangChain, which was a pretty, rapidly growing framework for making large language models composable, basically, in an agentic way, which I found very interesting. But again, I hit the hurdle of actually deploying these type of apps to production. And so my fascination was, okay, and my objective with all of this was like, okay, how can I build something that I can use in order to create marketing assets, but also run them in production? So my dream was that instead of, because 10 years ago, as I told you, I created a company where we did Google listing ads or text ads automatically. But now the possibilities are endless, right? So you could do whatever type of ad automatically, basically. But in order to do that, you need to be able to deploy these technologies to the cloud. You need to have a scalable setup and infrastructure, and you need to actually know what you're doing when it comes to running different type of large language models or image diffusion models in an app. And in our case, we had to run, in order to achieve our goal with creating marketing assets, we had to deploy around 10 autonomous small mini agents that went out and did different tasks, gathered different type of information, and retrieved that information into the mother agent, basically, and then could generate a marketing asset, basically. So in order to do that, I had to build some kind of backend that would be deployable and not scalable, but at least deployable to production. So that was basically the embryo of Superagent. The first lines of code that were written with the purpose of creating a new type of product for marketers, basically. That was the beginning. And after a while, I started noticing that, wow, you can make like amazing agents with this backend, basically, and deploy it and then invoke it through an API or an SDK in whatever app or environment that you're working in, basically. It could be a web app, it could be an iOS app, it could be an Android app, it doesn't matter. You could run it anywhere. And you didn't have to think about, I made it in a way that you didn't have to think about all of the limitations that come with large language models and running agents that run large language models in production, basically. And so I think it was around 4 weeks ago, I decided to open source the code. And it's been a wild ride since. I mean, basically, I have around 200 people on the server. Discord server have around, I don't know, like 150 forkers that book schedule meetings with me and ask me about contributions or in what direction I'm going so that they can, sync up and stuff like that. So it's been great. And the assumptions I have regarding this technology as a whole is that I believe that AI and also agentic AI will basically change the way we build products and change the way we build software. We've already started seeing it now, but it will be more prominent even in the future. And so that's like the first assumption. And the second assumption is that people that are tasked with building these agents or this technology will not be machine learning engineers, because there are very few machine learning engineers that you can actually hire to do this specific task. So it will be regular web developers or even no code developers. So that's like the second assumption that I have. And the third one is basically if you think about how we basically interact with an agent or a LLM or any type of model, really, it's mostly done through prompts and chat. So that's the way humans interact with this technology today. I believe that will also change in the future. We will have other ways of communicating that might be more async, that might not even necessarily have any human input at all. And we see that with a couple of frameworks out there that run autonomously. And I see that as a big future for agents as a whole. And Superagent basically is the embodiment of these three assumptions. So everything I do, every line of code I write is with these three assumptions as my guiding light, basically.
That's awesome. Lots to go into there. I have a lot of similar thoughts and parallels in kind of the Starmorph evolving process that I've run into. So I'll touch on a few of those, and then there's a few areas I think we could do a whole talk just about, one of those 10 areas.
Sure.
But yeah, the first thing is I had a similar experience with running into AI, working at startups and seeing, the machine learning team kind of doing their thing. And it was a large, complex infrastructure and required a lot of, formal training to be able to work with those tools. And now we're seeing kind of the democratization of that. And then, as you just said, now maybe it's at the point where someone who's comfortable deploying a little code can do a little front end development can do it. But I could see a situation in the future where maybe when you go on your iPhone and you make a new chat, you're choosing if you're talking with a human or an agent. So I think that it's going to continue to the level of resistance in interacting with LLMs is clearly just rapidly getting easier and easier. There's also tools that have recently come out to run LLMs in the browser and I think on a phone as well. So things like that can continue to break down the barriers to get it to more people. But yeah, so seeing those machine learning engineers at startups in their own area, and then for me, I remember when GPT-3 came out and there was just a buzz about it and it was like this breakthrough. Wow, this is like surprising. And that was the first thing that kind of popped up on my radar. And then the second thing, same as you, was my friend showed me Stable Diffusion. And it was just really a powerful moment. And I totally resonate with both you and your friend in getting the images and making the images because it's a very like powerful, I think, like dopamine response when you can just immediately create your vision and you get this feedback in a few seconds on what you were thinking in your brain, and it's really satisfying and you want to just share it. So yeah, those tools, and also kind of tying that into something else you were saying about, maybe we could do text originally, now we can do images, and now we can do anything. We can do text, we can do video, we can do audio. In a recent NVIDIA conference, they actually had like a map where it was like basically you can go from any modality to any other modality. So you could go like text to DNA or text to video or video to audio. So it's almost like we're getting to like the physics of how these LLMs can like translate things into different forms, which is really interesting. Um, and then yeah, another thing you mentioned that I think I've been running into a lot with Starmorph is the deployment issue. And these frameworks are changing a lot. I have some LangChain code written 2 months ago that I'm just going to rebuild fresh instead of renovating because it changes so quickly. And I think again the resistance on that is going down. It's people are integrating it into Node.js, into Vercel. Vercel just released a really great Svelte AI SDK with Hugging Face in it that looks really cool. But the deployment and also you mentioned the application, I think is something that a lot of people are extremely interested in. Okay, this technology is amazing. How do I apply it? How do I apply it to my life and my business and use it to create marketing assets or anything that has utility with business data and business operations. So I see a lot of people that are not coders but are now deploying their own web apps because they want to play with these things. And I think tools like Vercel and Streamlit and um, Replit and other tools that allow people to deploy these apps is really exciting. And then that's really interesting to hear. I didn't know that Superagent was coming also from kind of a marketing background, and I'm glad to hear that because I want to do that too. I want to build these automation pipelines where it's connecting to, Twitter and things like that. So
Right.
I yeah, I played with the Super Agent UI a few days ago, and I found it. I think the UI looks absolutely amazing. Beautiful
Thank you.
design. It was very easy for me to understand. I found the abstractions that you did really easy to follow. Upload your documents. You don't really mention embeddings, but it's clear. And so abstracting out those technical details and making it just I think a lot of people are wrapping their head around like the kind of context augmentation architecture and how,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think building the UI for that is really critical, and so I'm excited to use Super Agent and
Cool.
see the progress of it too. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, lots of stuff to go over. I guess the next thing I would ask you about is you mentioned the input limitations, and that's something I've been thinking about as well. Is GPT-4 is so powerful. Our limit is how much time do we have to sit down and engineer the prompts to get the output we want? And it's not scalable. I can't sit down for 40 hours a day, obviously, and write a thousand prompts, but an API could do a cron job to, send 10,000 prompts a day. So I think this input, and also there's the user interface limitation where maybe we get to a point where you're just bringing in all your audio and video data and then ingesting it. So, what do you think about yeah, kind of the state of the current UI, and then maybe where just the industry in general might be heading in terms of improving the input and output with these machines?
I find I have the if you think about it more in a like how will the world look like? What will products look like in let's say 2 years? So if you look 10 years back, let's say me and you we decided to create a new CRM, right? And we want to compete against Salesforce, Pipedrive, and all of these guys in the CRM space, HubSpot, etc., etc. And what we need to do, or what we needed to do previously, was to build a not only a great user experience and a great service as a whole, but we also need to compete with features. It was a feature-based competition. So HubSpot releases something, I release something, the similar thing, or the other way around. So it was very much, and also as a purchaser of a software, you most of the time look at, depending on what type of purchaser you are, you basically look at three things. You look at price, you look at features, and you look at security, depending on how big you are as an organization, right? These were the three things that people were looking at. I believe that in the future, software will not be competing. Security will be important, privacy will be important, price is always important, but the feature set will, I believe, shift to becoming intelligence instead. So how intelligent is your CRM? Because nowadays we can build with these technologies, we can build intelligent software, not just features, but a real intelligent CRM. And so the competition, and I think you see it already, even though it might look like they're releasing features like Notion released AI, Vercel is releasing AI. It's not really a feature. They are trying to build intelligence into their platform because they know that if we can be more intelligent than our competitor, we don't even have to build features. We can win by being more intelligent, basically. And that's the power of LLMs and also image diffusion and whatever type of new AI technology that will come in the future. So that's the thing we have to have in mind. And if we then extrapolate that back to what we were discussing regarding the input limitation in itself, I think like this. Okay, so when this technology actually hits some kind of scale, and with scale, I don't mean chat over your PDF app. That's not scale. That's hobby projects more or less. But when businesses, organizations really start implementing LLMs into their workflows, the way these agents will get invoked will differ a lot from what we see today. With example would be ChatGPT, where you sit in a window and an operator basically types stuff. It will be more like the thing you mentioned, like a service in the cloud, like any other type of cloud service that you have today. We have to remember that we run a bunch of different cloud services today that run without any human input, and they do a great job at what they are supposed to do. This technology will do the same, and it will probably not be humans sitting like chatting with it, even though that is a strong use case, I believe. Still, I do it all the time myself, basically. And I wouldn't be able to produce as much code as I produced the past couple of weeks without AI. That's also something that I want to mention, that I would say 20% of everything I write is basically AI nowadays, and that's amazing. And I'm not actually prompting it to write anything. It just writes it for me, So that's another way of actually invoking AI without actually prompting it, chatting with it. So I believe intelligence will be built into software services, and that's the huge opportunity. But in order for us to be able to do that, we need a stable infrastructure and a stable way of releasing this type of software, basically, or this type of intelligence. And that comes with a lot of work, and it's not easy. And if you look at Vercel, what they have done with the AI SDK that they have released, I'm a huge fan of Vercel. I've been a user way back since when they weren't even named Vercel. I believe that is a great thing that they're doing. But my approach is a bit different from that, because Vercel is a platform in itself. So if you are to use the AI SDK, it's built in a way that you need to use it in the Vercel, namespace, so to speak. I'm coming at it from a different approach. I don't care where you host your apps. I don't care if it runs serverless or if you run it on a VPS on DigitalOcean, or I don't care if you run it locally. I want to create something, and I believe that there needs to be something, a framework which you can run independently of your stack or environment. And that's why I built Superagent as an API. It's an API first approach to agents, more than a infrastructure approach to agents or a framework approach to agents. So like LangChain is a framework, Superagent is not a framework in that sense. It's more of an API layer to that framework, which brings more flexibility into actually running these apps in whatever environment stack that you choose to run them on, without having to change anything, really. You don't have to go to Vercel. You don't have to go to Streamlit or to any other, service provider. It's up to you where you run your app, and you can invoke your agent in whatever way you want. And I also believe that the rapid shift that Vercel has done to basically migrate most of the apps that we use, or most of the apps like people build, to a serverless infrastructure, I don't see the serverless infrastructure being super compatible with agents, specifically due to limitations on size of these functions that you can run on a serverless cloud, but also request times. I mean, the timeout that a serverless cloud has. I see in the future agents that can run for hours. And there needs to be some infrastructure for that. It's not only, npm I install AI SDK and let's go. It's not as simple as that. Uh, not for bigger use cases, at least.
Definitely. I've run into that issue already. I have, 50
There you
different
go.
web applications on various deployment environments, some serverless, some with a server, some that don't have a UI. So yeah, I think that idea, and also, you have your Python devs and you have a lot of JavaScript libraries popping up too. I think even with LangChain, Python is typically, I would say, the main thing that people are coding a lot of the frameworks and tools with. But it's nice to be
Yeah.
able to, yeah, have a multi-language support.
Yeah, and the shift that has happened in the web community, you have to understand why Python can become a big language for regular web developers. I believe it can. And the reason for that is that uh, like around 7 years ago, we switched from rendering stuff on the server to rendering it on the client. We wanted to render apps in the client, in the browser with JavaScript. That was like the big thing. I was a proponent of this. I loved it. I ran every type of JavaScript library from Backbone to Ember, to Angular to React, all of that. Then we saw gradually, well, that's not super performant. It's not good for page speed. It's not good for SEO. So gradually, what Vercel did was to bring JavaScript to the server so that you can code in the same language which you've used to in your browser, but you can now code it on the server in a serverless environment, etc., with Node.js and all of that stuff as well. And you get all of the libraries that the package managers have. So people are used to actually working in the server nowadays, which they weren't. So web developers primarily worked in the browser. Now they've started working on the server, which makes it easier for them to also learn other type of code or languages that can run on other type of infra on the server. And I believe that Python is a great language, specifically Python 3 and what they've done with that. And I actually created the first version of Superagent in JavaScript, but I migrated due to the lack of tooling and lack of reliability on those packages, basically, that I was using at that time. So I believe that with the AI boom, also a lot more developers will start learning Python again, and not only frameworks on top of JavaScript like React.
Yeah, that what you said actually applies directly to what my experience has been, that I was a front end dev. Next.js allowed me to get closer to the server, started playing with, Supabase, Firebase, PlanetScale, all the different database options,
Right,
and building AI apps in JavaScript because I'm typically working with a lot of client side stuff. But now
right.
seeing that it seems like a lot of the Python functionality is kind of a more stable architecture. I like how it's concise. It just feels like a more stable architecture to build on top of, and plus all of the extra functionality. I'm working on translating a lot of Starmorph libraries into Python as well as JavaScript.
Hmm.
So going back to something you said earlier,
Yeah,
talking about the what it's really going to come down to in terms of software products, because I agree, obviously the software industry is getting rapidly changed right now with another thing is just the cost to produce software now when you can have agents or chatbot like interfaces that can have full knowledge of software documentation and really quickly integrate 10 different npm libraries and scaffold out web applications. And there are definitely still hallucinations and big limitations to that, but I use it every single day. I talk to one of my bots that I gave up my full stack, and it's been able to, you can actually look at my GitHub chart and see the day that GPT-4 came out, and then
Yeah, yeah.
the the yeah, multiple increase after that.
Yeah.
So in terms of what I was getting to is in terms of what you were speaking of the intelligence and how that's going to become a core functionality of software in the future as software changes, the cost of it to produce it, the time to produce it goes down, and we're just going to have so much. I mean, already we can see hundreds of web applications that people are launching, and I think everyone's ability to produce quality software has just jumped up a lot. So we're going to have more options, more images online, more text online. I feels like we're going to have this massive influx of, like you said, intelligence, information, media. So in terms of business and how companies are going to be building their their moats and their differentiation in terms of intelligence, it seems like off the bat that maybe a few big winners are going to be able to get the most intelligence because not all of us have access to the same level of data. So I'm not saying that I think it's going to be a winner takes all, one takes all, because I think it usually happens differently than that. But I think, yeah, I'd be curious to hear what you think in terms of how the intelligence might be organized across organizations. And then a subset of that is I personally feel that there's both kind of the knowledge and intelligence of the bot and its functionalities, and then there's kind of the integration layer, which is how can you use this intelligence to apply it into actual business utility, so connecting with APIs and things like that. So how do you think that as these tools get so more powerful and our ability to create a massive amount of intelligence increases, that will start to change the landscape and how it will be kind of mapped out and spread out?
I believe that, I mean, if I look at the trends, if we start with the actual model itself, like let's take a large language model as an example to make it easier. If you look at, so basically I see it exactly like you see it. I see it in three different layers. I see the language model as one layer. I see the context, e.g. the documents and the data sources that you want it to have access to, as another layer. And then I see tools, which
Mm-hmm.
are basically, they are not data sources, but they are tools similar to your computer right now. You have Microsoft Word. That's a tool, but the actual document, the docx document, is a document. It's not a tool. So I see like that kind of layering basically here as well. So if we start with the LLM, I believe that you will see a lot of smaller LLMs which are very specific in their use case. So an example would be, instead of running like a GitHub like Copilot product on an LLM that is like GPT 3.5, whatever, or GPT-4, probably someone will, I know Replit has done it. They built their own language model that is trained for just writing code. You can't do anything else with it. And it's faster to do it that way. It's more accurate to do it that way, and it's cheaper to actually run that model in that way. So I see models becoming a bit smaller, perhaps, and a bit more specific. And if you extrapolate that all the way to a business, why wouldn't a business have their own model if it was easy to train, if it was easy and cheap to deploy and stable and scalable, if it was as a service? Why wouldn't they do that? I mean, that makes sense to me that they would do that if the technology, which it will be, but it's not really there yet, but it will be there soon, I guess. Anybody can train their own model. That's the thing. Bring your own model, basically, that
Mm-hmm.
paradigm. And so the
That's interesting.
second thing would be regarding the data sources or the context of the LLM itself, which I work with a lot. And I believe that that context would be a something that we will see a bunch of different service providers that are already in place. I mean, there are a bunch of different type of service providers that work with ingestion of documents, and you see also the infrastructure layer, vector databases. You have a lot of them, you have a lot of options, etc., etc. So I see that as also becoming bigger, of course. Not only the infra, but also the actual connectors to different type of data sources. And this has happened. This happens in cycles. I mean, 10 years ago, the same thing happened when all of these different type of software as a service players came up. You had like Pipedrive, Salesforce. They all have app stores. They all have connectors to different type of services. It's not something new. It's happened before. It will happen again, but in a different context this time. And the interesting part for me is what tools people build on top of these technologies. And I mean, a tool is basically a function that does something. It takes in data and it runs that data, and it retrieves or creates or destroys data somewhere, and it's basically ran by a large language model. And all of these three layers together is what an agent is. It's the anatomy of an agent, basically. If you take all of these three layers and just bring them into a body, it will be the anatomy of an agent, basically. So that's how I see that, and I believe that the business to business side of things is more. I believe the business to business side of things is something that the larger players, of course, will be good at. Google, Meta, all of those players, they have a lot of data, they have a lot of know-how, and they have a lot of money. So they will, of course, build amazing products. But I also see a possibility for new players that concentrate on internal agents that run internally in a business. An example would be, let's say you sit in you're in customer success or customer support. It just makes sense to have an agent there, which can basically highlight which customers you should take first, which tickets you should handle first, and it would be connected to all of the business data you have on that customer, purchases, invoices, other type of interactions they might have had with your service, and you could prioritize, you can do stuff automatically. All of this stuff that's done internally in one business unit at a company could be run or enhanced by agents. And I believe in enhancement. I don't believe in replacement, because I mean, technology like the internet it replaced some people, but it also enhanced a lot of people. And I think that the enhancement part is much more positive to focus on than the replacement part, because that's a bit negative when you want to replace people with humans with machines, basically. So I believe in a big chunk of the market being internal tools, basically for different type of enterprises in all different type of sizes, and you've already started seeing that. One example is chat over my documentation, which basically every service I use has that now. It's like an AI chat. I don't have to read the documentation. I just ask the documentation, and it writes code for me, right? So that's an example of a internal tool that has been replaced or enhanced by agent or an agentic entity, basically. So I see that as a huge possibility. And from what I'm doing, I'm focusing more on that part than the larger, business to business kind of thing, because I believe that that is something that the bigger players are better at and are incentivized to solve.
I agree. I think that's a useful way to segment it out because we're seeing a lot of progress on both fronts, both on, the Bard-like tools and the
Yeah.
Facebook research, and yeah, the more large scale business and the tools that they're providing, and then also what a small team can provide on a smaller scale and maybe easier and quicker to integrate.
Yeah.
I love the idea of what you said, build your own model. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that brings up an interesting thing with this ecosystem is that a lot of, and you were talking about these vector database tools and things. I've seen someone launch a embedding service where they were kind of creating public embeddings of different data.
Yeah.
And that's something I think is really interesting about this space. And as a background, I feel that GitHub is one of the best things that humanity has ever done.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's, I think that it just shows the level of human cooperation and coordination and what we're able to build in our. I wish that like Congress used GitHub for bills and we could track the progress of our, communication for everything in the same way because I think it's such a good system. And okay. So this idea of bringing your own model
Mm-hmm.
and all of the tools that are open source versus, some of the tools that maybe are more in the control of large players. But I think we're kind of seeing a new, more open ecosystem where maybe our data is no longer confined to one application. You don't leave Facebook and all of your pictures are locked in there. Maybe you have an embedding of your pictures in the cloud and you can bring those with you to whatever platform you log into, or so almost new forms of auth. What if you had a vector new idea right here, vector database auth, where you can log in with your embedding sets? And
Yeah.
I guess Superagent is already thinking in terms of, uploading your files and having that in a service that can be applied to many different implementations. But I think that's really exciting to see the the openness and the tools that are available to tap into for all of the developers. And another element of that is like the ChatGPT plugins, for example. And going back to what you were saying about this kind of new tech platform boom, where okay, the idea of SaaS booms, the idea of mobile apps and the iOS App Store boom. And I've heard a lot of people compare the ChatGPT plugin store to the App Store, and I think maybe even more than that, I think that definitely it seems like SEO, not that it's going to die, but I think that it could maybe be renamed as retrieval, and that how well formatted is your data to be ingested and retrieved from large language models could be an extremely valuable um, metadata structure for businesses to get organic traffic in the future from all of the LLMs that could connect and loop them into a new platform. So yeah, just the openness of it is really exciting. That could also lead into a whole conversation about the open source versus the closed and kind of like software
Yeah,
ethics
let's
and
let's do that. I believe that's a huge thing for me because I decided to release it open source, and I believe that uh, releasing something open source doesn't mean that you don't want to build a company around it. In my opinion, because nowadays, if you look 10 years back again, you had a lot of open source projects, but very few of them were actually a whole product. So you would have a package, or someone would release a subset of a product or a microservice or something open source, and that's why the package managers are filled with utility open source projects. Basically, what we've seen, or what I've seen at least, from what I've seen, is that nowadays you start seeing actually products being built open source, still making money, but having a different type of business model when it comes to source code itself. And there are different type of licenses, of course. Mine runs MIT, but you other people run other type of licenses. And the reason why it's important, or what is important for me to open source, is I only have one reason in mind, and that's the actual developer that I'm trying to help. So my belief is that if I open source it and engage the community that I'm building this for into that open source repository, I will be able to create something that they will actually want to use in the end. And they might want to fork it and use it internally due to, regulatory issues, security concerns, and that's fine. But some of them won't. Some of them would want to have a no-code like interface like the one you mentioned that I built, or a hosted version with more functionality when it comes to scheduling and that kind of stuff, cron jobs as we mentioned. And so that's how I see it. One other thing I see is that right now I still have some dependencies on proprietary vector stores as an example. But one thing that we actually enabled this week was to open up a plugin system for vector databases. And I believe that, small entrepreneurs and regular people are really bad at security. They really suck at understanding what happens with their data. And an example of this might be embeddings. Who actually owns the embedding that you create using a vector store? Is it you? Is it somebody else? Is it a third? You don't know. You have to understand the technology behind these things in order to actually understand where your data, who owns your data. What happens when I create an index at company X? Did I create an embedding with my own API key? Or was that done magically somehow? And so there are nuances to all of this stuff, and which I believe that is okay if you are willing to, like purchase a service that does everything for you, but it should also be in a way where you can fork off and do whatever you want without having any concerns of stuff getting manipulated or data, who owns data, etc., etc. So that's a core thing for me, that I want to have no real dependencies on proprietary technology. So everything we build, or I want to build with Superagent, should be open source. Every framework, every utility, every every puzzle in the big picture should be open source, in my opinion, due to the possibility to fork, basically, which is a powerful thing. You can fork whatever you want.
Yeah, it is. I collect.
Yeah.
I have two. It's like the new version for me of when you buy a bunch of books and then you just put them on your shelf and don't read them. I have like 300 GitHub repos that I need to spend 50 hours each on. But
Yeah,
it is valuable being able to you can deploy a SaaS in one day now. Just, like you said, there's full products on. I mean, maybe
yeah,
not, a full. You'd have to differentiate it and innovate on top of it, of course, but something working.
yeah.
Awesome. So, I wanted to bring it back to close out to give people a little head start on getting started with Superagent. So, could you give a little introduction on maybe how to get started with the UI and how to get started with the API, what technologies they could use to integrate in case people want to get started using Superagent?
Sure. So if you are a more or less a web developer, I would recommend that you either use the SDK. We currently have a JavaScript SDK. We are releasing a Python SDK. Or you use the REST API that is connected to our cloud platform, basically. So Superagent Cloud through the REST API. You'll find that in docs.superagent.sh. And if you want a no-code way of creating agents, I would recommend superagent.sh if you want to use ours. But I want to emphasize that all of this is early, and it's early days for agents, and I'm trying to build something that is is possible to run in production. Okay. So that means that you won't have all of the fancy agent stuff that you find in some open source framework hosted and ready to run in production. That won't happen because I'm particularly picky with what I try to bring into the Superagent repository. Due to it has to be run in production in the end. But I encourage everyone who have a little bit of knowledge of code to check out the repository, Superagent, and contribute if they can, or just read the code and understand what it is actually doing and what it is supposed to do. I even encourage people to run it. You can run it with one click on whatever, hosting provider you want, Render, Google Cloud, DigitalOcean. It's Dockerized, it's containerized, so you can just run it with one click and you'll get up. You don't have to pay anything. And the same goes for Superagent Cloud. It's free to use, even though we might charge people later on, because if it grows, we can't offer it for free, of course. But even in Superagent Cloud, you still use your own API keys. You still get your own embeddings on your account if you use OpenAI embeddings or whatever other embeddings. We don't keep anything except for an abstraction of what your agent is. It's a database basically with instructions on how you've built your agent, and that's it. So I'll urge anyone to try it out and join our Discord as well. You can probably post the link, and there's a lot of amazing ideas there, and I usually am there 24/7 basically. So yeah.
Yeah, that's where I ran into you. I saw you posting about the June 13th new GPT model that came out with API calls and released something on the same day. So I was like, okay, this guy's serious about building agents.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would also definitely recommend that everyone, I feel like it's a good exercise, honestly, for everyone to just go into Superagent and just go through all the steps. Put a new prompt in there, upload a file, make a new agent, because I think it's a new conceptual way of thinking about what is possible, and the UI is a really easy way for non-coders to jump deep into what's happening in LLMs and get set up with a really nice interface. So thank you so much for coming on. I'm sure we could talk about stuff forever, but thank you very much. And I'm really excited for Superagent, and I'd love to tell you more at some point about Starmorph too, and see if there's any way I could contribute.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I will stay in touch.
I appreciate the time.
Absolutely, you too. I'm sure you're super busy after that blow up on GitHub open source. I can only imagine. So thank you very much.
Today is contribution day. So today I'm only contributing. I'm not doing anything on Superagent today, just contributing to other projects.
Nice.
That's
awesome.
My, Cool. Thank you, Dylan.
Thank you. Have a good rest of the day.
You too.
Thanks.
Bye.